Hello, everyone. This is Jorge Diaz, president and founder of Larry Jacob Internet Marketing, and I'm bringing you another episode of what used to be called Defining Infusionsoft Success. We're going to come up with another name now that Infusionsoft is Keep. And I'm continuing with a conversation I started in the previous episode with Greg Jenkins. So, Greg, thank you for continuing with me.
Hey, it's all good. I just realized maybe you should call it Keep Defining Success.
I'll write that one.
A little bit of wordplay, a little bit of tribute to the new brand. But
and people come up and say, George, you can't spell keep. What's wrong with you?
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. You run that risk.
So, okay. So if you saw the previous episode, we started talking about customer journey. This is part of, a case study that Greg ran for the African Leadership University. There's a lot of information, a precursor. We're also including a link here to his video if you want to learn more about it. In the previous part or previous episode, we were talking about marketing automation, and we were using the African Leadership University to illustrate how marketing automation might fit into a business, any business, regardless of if you're in Africa, California, Miami, whatever. So we started talking about customer journey, and I'm going to ask Greg to kind of go back through, you were talking about the 3 points, and I think that's a great place to start to continue where we left off before.
Yeah. So there's a quote that I like to use. And I'm still working on, I'm finessing the language with this a little bit, but it's like the only thing you need to do as a small business owner is focus on your customer's journey. But everything is part of their journey. That's sort of the flip. It's like, it's all you have to do, but everything is part of that journey. And the longer explanation to that, if you want to unpack that a little bit, is that, every business has a moment where the person goes from prospect to customer, right? It's the purchase, the transaction, right? And that looks different for every business. For me, it's when they become a member or buy a course. For you, it's when they hire you for a membership build or any of the other things that you provide. And for the African Leadership University, it's when they ultimately put a payment down to enroll in the MBA program. But my point is, something happens after the purchase and something happened before. And the composition of those three things is what we call the customer journey, right? Something led them from the very first time they interacted with your brand to becoming a customer. And then something led them after they become a customer all the way through whatever happened next, right?
Right. And going back to, because you're in the last one you quoted Brad Martineau, and it's Brett, right? I probably got that wrong. Whatever.
So there's a Brad and a Brett. This one was specifically from Brad. Yeah.
Brad also came up and said that, it's interesting. Once you do business with someone, it's so easy to lose them as a customer, not because you botched something, not because you made a mistake, but because you just ignored them. You got so busy looking at the front of the customer journey before the purchase that you forget the tail end, which leads people right for someone else to show up and, take your customer from you. So people forget that after a transaction, there's what comes later, which could be another sale. If you don't have another sale, are there people you can refer them to, whatever. But then at the beginning, it's kind of like, I'm looking for a toilet bowl plumber, or a plunger. Sure. And I go, where do I start? Oh, well, first of all, there's a million types of them, and who is it? And, why should I buy it here? I can go to Target, or I can just go here, or I can get a specialist. There's just a million things that happen before a purchase, and then there's a million things that can happen afterwards.
Yeah, so I think that's part of why I like the concept of journey so much, is because it forces us as small business owners, as marketers, to consider that these interactions don't happen in a vacuum, right? People don't just show up and buy and then disappear. Something happened first and something happens after. And if you accept that, once you acknowledge, the journey exists, and it does, then it becomes, well, what is it, right? What is the current reality? What is happening to our customers? And many of you probably already know that, but there's people who have surprises in their customer journey. When somebody reports something to you and you're like, shoot, I didn't realize that was happening, right? So there's asking, what is the reality? And then figuring out what should it look like, and how do we, what's the disparity? How do we bridge that gap? And how do we optimize what we are creating?
Right. How do you play into it to up your, if you know that like in the African university, they knew if they got 25,000 people on the front end, they could get 50 sales, or students, right? So
Right.
what does it look like? How many people do you have to get over here? And if it takes 25,000, I mean, the next question I might be asking Fred and those guys is, hey, how do we get only 10,000 people and still get the 50? Which means how do I optimize that journey?
Yeah, exactly. Right. So it's business and it's my livelihood, but it is also a game of numbers. And it's a matter of saying, okay, cool. Once we've established our baseline, how do we improve on it? And yeah, you can drive more traffic into your existing process, or you can optimize your existing process to do more with the traffic that you have. And you can do both. But to me, it makes a lot of sense to spend your time optimizing your journey before you turn up the traffic knob. Now, as you probably know, I think in the digital marketing space, there is a disproportionate amount of focus on the traffic and on the lead capture because it's just like sexier, right? It's more fun to talk about. There's a lot of acronyms up there. It is a lot less fun to talk about doing more with your existing customers and to follow up with people who have already spent money with you and guiding them towards either their next purchase or ultimately becoming a brand advocate, right? But there's opportunity everywhere, and
and even changing your business, or not necessarily changing it, but amplifying your business so that, hey, I sold the guy a toilet bowl plunger.
Yeah.
Now here, what you need is a septic tank treatment system so that you don't get the backups or whatever. So what are the complementary things without, of course, losing your focus? Where now you watered down what you do so much that people.
Yeah, if there are complementary offerings, right? It's a matter of helping guide them towards those things. Or if you find that there are people who have an appetite for something that just isn't what you're going to offer, there may be something that you're doing up front that is attracting the wrong types of customers who have problems you're not interested in solving, right? But you don't really start to uncover those until you acknowledge and begin to focus on the journey. And that is, at a super high level, the whole reason I made the video piece. As you mentioned, it's a 30-minute case study that I think showcases pretty well the project we did, and more importantly, the role that marketing automation played in crafting and enhancing the journey. But it's not unique to the African Leadership University. It's not unique to my business. It is I say in the video, I say it's a universal and formulaic approach that I think can work for everyone.
Yeah, no, and I totally agree. And it's interesting, this customer journey that we talk about. Again, I think everybody needs to map that out to really think of where do I have areas for improvement, where do I have blocks that keep people from moving over, and then there's something we were discussing is so Ryan Dice at TNC at Traffic and Conversion comes up and says,
yes,
don't be scared to try something that doesn't make sense. And it was interesting that he said something you can't measure, because everything you're talking formulaic is, what's my, but it was interesting. And of course, Greg and I have this in common. We both produce a lot of content, and sometimes people wondering, what are you trying to do? But it's like, how do you build that authority or that audience where you attract people? And I mean, eventually it's got to attract them into making them customers. Otherwise, we're just entertainers, I guess.
Yeah, so here's the way I think about it, right? My business serves Infusionsoft users, and if Infusionsoft users want to do something with the platform, then they may very well gravitate towards my courses as a way to empower them to accomplish that thing they want to do, right? But if they don't know what they want to do, then Infusionsoft it's gonna have a hard time serving them, and they won't see the value in my courses because it's not building toward anything. And
and by the way, I'm in the same boat as you are. We build membership sites which are, I want to say it's an addition to someone who's already in the Infusionsoft world or in that marketing automation. But
in order for them to want a membership site, they have to have an appetite for what a membership site solves. And so the point of this piece, the point of this video, it wasn't to direct sell my courses. It was to start conversations about the nature of the journey and the role that marketing automation can play in supporting it. And hopefully as people, as that light bulb gets switched on and they start to recognize, okay, these were the milestones in the ALU journey, but in my business, they look like this. And there's actually gaps here and there's gaps there. They'll start to see marketing automation could go plug those gaps. Or maybe they identify that there's an opportunity for a membership model to help create a more intentional customer experience, to help guide people down the progression path of their products, right? My goal wasn't to sell, a customer journey audit or to have people hire me to do that. That's not something
by
that
the way, you were telling me, I was going, what is Greg trying to sell here? Because I mean, go see the video. The video is really well done.
Yeah, thank you.
Are you promoting?
The feedback has.
Guy?
Yeah, the reason that I guess the goal was just to start conversations.
Yeah.
I believe this is a story that deserved to be told. I think it showcases well the ways in which marketing automation can solve problems for any business, not just for the university that we were working within. And I wanted to spur some dialogue for people. And if that creates an appetite for what I offer, the courses and the membership, that's great. But even if it doesn't, independent of my own interests, I feel really good about the contribution that this video is making and the collective impact it could have.
And let's, because we're talking about customer journey. If we think about the customer journey at the very beginning,
yes,
I used to be very involved in the Greater Miami Chamber of Commerce and B&I.
Sure.
Very, feet to the ground marketing and sales efforts, right? And I stopped doing that because the people there were not ready or didn't have enough of an understanding of marketing automation, customer journey, all this stuff we're talking about for my sales cycle to make sense. Because I mean, it would be 6 months to a year trying to just educate people on how to spell Infusionsoft, much less how to use it, right?
Totally,
But this kind of piece, like the one you're talking about, which is why I was really interested in talking about it with you, is because I can get that guy who's at B&I and thinking, you know what, I'm not getting the sales I need to. Or competition is jumping in and, man, they're taking my business and it's because they know how to use the internet and I don't. And when you throw a piece out like this, it's kind of like, maybe that's the beginning of their education journey, customer journey, that does get them to me. Now, I mean, at that point, it's so far into the future, it may not ever hit my funnel. But I'm part of that education process. And at any point, they're kind of going, hey, this is not ready for me. But this guy, George, he produces some stuff that's actually good. And maybe it's good for you,
Yeah, so as you know, I worked at Infusionsoft, like the company, for a while, and I delivered live training. And so I was in front of and face-to-face with a lot of customers, and I still am to this day. But perhaps the most common question I would get from people was, how are other people using Infusionsoft, right? Show me examples of other people who have made this thing do what it's supposed to do. And what they're looking for is they want to see high level the role that marketing automation can play. Because if you only look at it as these micro little pieces, it's tough to string them all together. Right. And so I think of this video as, it should create the appetite for what marketing automation does best. And if you want to hire someone to do that for you, great. But you have to know what you want out of it in order to structure the relationship you're hiring them into. Or if you want to do it yourself, that's awesome. But Infusionsoft is only a set of tools. It doesn't function all that well without a blueprint. And this isn't a step-by-step rubric, but it is a blueprint for how marketing automation can be used in creating an intentional and strategic customer journey.
Yeah. And by the way, this is something that Greg was telling me, because I had some questions for him before we started. And it was
right.
Like, I was thinking, Infusionsoft for a university like them with so many campuses and so many programs is probably not the right solution.
Right.
And then, interestingly enough, eventually you guys moved them into Salesforce, and that's not something you and Josh were experts at, so they moved on. But
that's right.
These, these strategies, these tactics are universal regardless of your implementation tools. Because I mean, you know, we're Keep and Infusionsoft related, but I mean, you can do this with ActiveCampaign. If you're doing websites, you can do it with Thinkific. You can do it with MemberMouse. There's a million ways to do it, but the concepts of how they apply to your business are going to be, you know, standard across them.
Yeah, right. So you know, tools are just tools, and they can be used to produce a specific outcome. But if you think about it as just like the mechanics of the equation, the mechanics are responsible for delivering a message. And the message is responsible for eliciting and creating emotion in the prospects. And emotion is what drives action. So if you want to get your prospects to do something, it starts with, how are you interacting with them? That's the mechanics.
And how do
what
you
are you doing?
How do you make them feel?
That's right. Yeah. And you know, that part translates around the world without problem, right? We used Facebook ads to send people to live events. We use live events to register people for consults with our reps. We used a pipeline to guide them through stages. We had a perpetual nurture process in place that adjusted the call to action based on where they were in the journey.
You're talking about a lot of gearhead things, but I'm a student and I applied to the African Leadership University.
Yes.
And no one has reached out to me in 2 weeks. I made a phone call and left a message on a voicemail and no one answered my question. How does that make me feel? Neglected, ignored, whatever, the kind of things you don't want your prospects to feel. And all the stuff that you're talking about addresses those things, because if I fill out a form and someone gets back to me and then it gets into the queue of the right person and not just anybody in the university, it's the, you know, the recruiter that's in charge of that geography so that he knows, hey, this person is interested, let me get back to him. Well, automation solved a feeling problem. And that's where I think people, it's like, what do I need Infusionsoft? Because you don't want your customers to feel ignored. You don't want customers to say, this guy has no clue because he sends me an email that talks to me like I'm a real estate agent, but I'm an investor.
Right.
Because, you know, you're broadcasting and you're not segmenting. And these tools enable you to give a much better feeling, for lack of a better word.
No, that's exactly right. Automation allows you to treat people as individuals, right? And I like to say that, you know, people have this inherent resistance to automation, I think, because of the word.
Well, they think, oh, people are just going to think that I'm spamming them. It's like,
right.
If you treat them like a spammer does, then yeah, you will. But
if it's done poorly, it can feel cold and robotic. But if automation is done well, it should feel personal and seamless. And you'll see in the, or you have seen, but other people will see in the video itself, there's a couple good quotes from the ALU staff, right? One was, the problem with keeping track of things manually is that it gets really overwhelming really quickly, right? If you just keep track of things in your head, humans are susceptible to forgetting things or to dropping the ball. Automation doesn't do that, right? And the role of automation isn't to remove humans from the equation, it's to actually allow humans to be applied more strategically, right? It's not the best use of a human's job to send out emails that need to happen at any degree of regularity. Automation can do that so that humans can be responsible for answering the phone when it rings, right? We didn't remove humans from the process. We just used automation to make sure that humans were used as efficiently as possible. One of the sales reps or admissions reps, his name was Kevin Rugamba, he said he would pick up the phone and talk to people, and it took him a little bit of adjusting because the people on the other end of the phone felt like they knew him already, because automation had curated that relationship. He had been emailing them for however long that when they talked, they were like, oh, good, it's my buddy Kevin. And that's what automation does, is it saves you the hassle of getting to know one another each time organically. It builds that rapport. It builds that inherent trust. It does more of the things we would do anyway.
Yeah, and I know you probably experience this. I will go to conferences, and I will have people go,
yes. Yeah.
You're the guy.
Yeah.
And it's kind of like, I mean, at the beginning it was like, I'm looking around, right? And now I'm used to it because I do so much video. I do so much, outbound marketing and pieces that people recognize me. And it's interesting because they'll start talking to me and they'll refer to something very specific that I said in a video. And I go, gosh, I think I remember saying that at one point. And it's like, wow. Now imagine if they come up and they ask you for advice. You don't have to come up and say, hey, look, I got a master's degree from Purdue. I've been in programming. I used to work at IBM. I was at KPMG Consulting. Because a lot of these people read my bio and they know that. So now I've kind of got all that out of the way. And now they're talking to me as someone really intelligent. And if they talk to someone else who's a competitor and who they're considering doing business with, it's kind of like, man, it took me so much work to get to know this person. His credibility is just not there. And so a lot of this builds your credibility so that when you do get to that just about closing a deal, they're not thinking about stuff that, is a distraction.
Yeah, I mean, you know this as well as anyone, but like if you want to get people to do something, there are steps and measures you can and should be taking ahead of time to seed that idea, to answer and proactively address objections, right? This is pretty common in the marketing world. And a lot of times people use sales conversations to address those concerns or to raise awareness about certain things or to deliver case studies, right? But it doesn't have to happen in real time. A lot of those things can be done through automation as part of the customer's journey, especially if you find that, this is a common objection we're seeing. Let's move upstream and either somewhere in our marketing or in our messaging, let's proactively position it a different way so that by the time people get to the point of making a buying decision, you've already addressed the things that they would have asked anyway.
Well, and as a final point, because we could go on forever on this, right?
Of course, yeah.
Is a lot of this is happening in your sales journey before you even know it's happening.
Yes.
So a lot of times, it's like when you go to the store and someone comes up and says, can I help you? And it's kind of like, no, I just want to look around.
Yeah.
And so people today have the luxury of being able to shop around because there's so much information available. And when they want to reach you, you better make it easy for them to reach you. They're almost only validating what they've heard about you or about your product. So it's, people buy emotionally, but now the logic, let me talk to this person and see if it's not just smoke and mirrors, but that's a different conversation versus, hey, let me teach you about what marketing automation and membership sites is about. It's like, no, I already know that. Can you give me a couple references? Can you show me examples of your work? And by the way, in my case, they can just go online and see examples of my work. But it's a different conversation. And that's why my sales cycle is, frankly, on average, a week to 2 weeks. Sometimes it's like they talk to me on Thursday and, I mean, literally they're credit carding me the next day.
Yeah. Well, George, it sounds like you have a pretty clear understanding of what your customer's journey looks like, but not everyone does.
No, for sure. And that's why I wanted to illuminate people because this is just a super example.
Yeah, exactly. So it begins with having that conversation. What is the reality, right? And then mapping what are my milestones, and then what are the gaps between them, and where are people falling between the cracks, and how do we pave that path so we get more of the outcome we're trying to produce with less of the effort or with the same amount of effort, right? And I had a conversation with a friend the other day who was fascinated by what I do, and he just felt like, does automation mean I'm lazy, right? Does automation, not me, but he meant like, does using automation mean that I'm not like doing as good of a job? And I don't think so, right? I think it actually means quite the opposite.
Dude, sometimes I think I'm working way too hard.
Yeah, right. There's a quote from my friend Gareth Everson that I like. He said, automation is you being you on your best day every single day. Right? It's like if you only had one customer and that customer got all of your focus, how would you treat them and what would you do for them? And then automation is that, right? But it's that at scale. Right, exactly. And that to me is really reassuring because before I worked at Infusionsoft, I ran a business that was entirely manual, and I actually had a pronounced resistance to automation and to technology because I just didn't get it. And I felt like I was too important to the equation to remove myself from it. And that was ego speaking. It's because I didn't understand that automation is an extension of you. It isn't cold and robotic unless you do it poorly. If it's done well, it should extend the same level of care that you would do anyway.
Yeah, and as a matter of fact, if you ever watch any of my videos, my wife will go, "Dude, did you have to say that?" And it's kind of like, it's the same thing she tells me in person. Did you really have to say that? And it's kind of like, well, that's me. So it's cloning me in a lot of ways so more people see it. So, hey, anyway, I don't want this to go on forever. I really appreciate it. I think this was a fabulous conversation. I hope our listeners, or people watching, can kind of illuminate themselves because, again, marketing automation can work in so many things, including Africa. And, you might be missing out on something that could be just a huge boon to you.
Yeah. Well, thanks for including me, George. I love talking about this stuff. I'm really proud of my role in this project. But more importantly, I just really like the way it showcases how marketing automation can fit for a business and the problems it can solve and the importance of focusing on the customer's journey.
Okay. And we'll end it with that. Hey, thank you very much, Greg.
Dude, this was great. Yeah, appreciate it.